is you're not going to do it yourselves. You're going to give wakala to someone else, either through your travel agent, or you could do it on your own. There are some shacks that are available around Medina or Mecca or at the airport that you could buy those slaughters. And there are 3 different kind of slaughters, right? So that's the third. And what's the fourth? Tawaf and Sa'i. Tawaf and Sa'i is very difficult. It's the most difficult of all of those responsibilities. Specifically, Sa'i is very difficult. So if I have a choice, I would start with Tawaf and Sa'i. If I have a choice, in most of your cases, I'd say 90-95% you don't have a choice. Wherever the transportation takes you and throws you, that's where you're starting. If you have a choice, then I would. Certain years we were able to finish. So the minor hil meaning what? Minor hil meaning I could do 3 out of all of these 4 orders. If I did it, everything becomes permissible to me except one thing. What is that? Intercourse with your spouses. Major hil when I've done all 4 out of 4. Does order matter in these 4 things? It does not matter. Any 3 of those 4 you will be able to be in a state of minor hil. If you done all 4, you will be out of the state of ihram, if you would. There is rukun and wajib. What is rukun and what is wajib?
Rukun is you have to do it. There is no slaughter for this weather.
Rukun is like a pillar. Pillar of a building. So each building may have 4 pillars or 5 pillars. These basically carry the weight of the whole Hajj. You knock off one of those pillars, what happened? It's gone. You don't have a Hajj. So there is nothing that you could mend. What about wajib?
Wajib is the thing where you can offer the slaughter.
Exactly. Wajib is when you have an obligation. If you miss it, for one reason or another, it's out of your control or within your control or something, but you definitely missed it. You could always mend it by doing a slaughter, and that slaughter called fidya. It's not called udhiyah. The slaughter of Hajj, what is it called? Hadi. Called Hadi. It's not called udhiyah. People who are like me, myself, who are in Raleigh, would do an udhiyah on behalf of myself and all of people in my household. Okay, 1 for the whole family. But in your case, it's called Hadi, and you do 1 for each individual, right? So if you and your spouse, each one of you has to do 1. It's about 425 riyals, maybe $120 US. So you could give it now to your Hajj agent to do that for you. What is Tawaf al-Wada'? That's the last tawaf that you do around the Kaaba. And that's the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. ليكن آخر عهدك بالبيت العتيق. The last thing that you do is basically making tawaf around the Al-Bayt al-Atiq, which is the old house. Now we've discussed that Al-Kaaba was first built by what? But during the time of Adam, and the scholars deduct that from the verse of the Quran, إن أول بيت للذي ببكة مباركة. The first house to ever have been built for the worship of the monotheism of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the Kaaba. للذي ببكة. Becca is another name of Mecca. So it was really built during Adam's time. Some scholars says was really built by the angels themselves. It is basically equivalent right under Al-Bayt al-Ma'mur. Al-Bayt al-Ma'mur, it is basically an equivalent to the Kaaba, where the angels go through them. They go through this Al-Bayt al-Ma'mur right underneath it. Every day 70,000 angels go through this house. They would never return back to it. So imagine how enormous the number of the angels. So they are from the day of creation until the end of days, 70,000 angels go through the Al-Bayt al-Ma'mur. So it is right above the Kaaba itself. So that's what you will do, the last thing that you do in Tawaf al-Wada'. Any questions about what we've covered before the last 2 weeks? Yes.
When you do stoning,
yes.
I know that at every like Safa, Marwa, we raise our hands and do du'as.
Yes.
At Jamarat, at stoning at that time, we do not do du'as.
For Jamrat al-Aqaba, you are still allowed to make takbir, labbaik Allahum, until you start what? Approaching the Jamrat al-Aqaba, and then you do stoning. There is no dua, if you would, in the 10th of the Hijjah. But on the 11th, on the 12th, Ayyam al-Tashriq, and possibly the 13th, okay, if you're doing a hasten Hajj, you do stoning only on the 11th and the 12th. If you do a complete Hajj, you add to it to the 13th. The only time that you make dua is after you finish a Jamrat al-Sughra. And there's an area between it, and I've showed you a video, where you basically stand up as the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he would stand up facing the Kaaba and raising his hands. The dua is acceptable, so don't waste it. In between.
Not right at
No, not right at it. After you finish stoning the 7 stones in the Jamrat al-Sughra, the small one, and you move about in the area between the Jamrat al-Sughra al-Wusta, between the small and the middle, and you're facing the Kaaba is a little bit in an angle, and you raise your hand and you're making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, dua acceptable to yourselves, to your family members, to your children, to whomever you want to wish to make dua. And then after you finish the stoning of the Jamra al-Wusta, you move about also. There's a long area. There's a stretch. The stretch is much longer between the middle and the big Jamrat al-Aqaba. So that you even have a long period. Make sure that you make dua and raise your hands. The dua is acceptable. I'd say 99.5% of people do not make dua. So there are, of course, it is not required, but the dua is acceptable. Why not use it? So by all means do that, inshallah ta'ala. Yes, question, yes.
When you are in Mina,
Yes.
and if you want, when you're doing the tawaf, and
Yes.
you said the nighttime tawafs are, is it possible nighttime tawaf? Because you have to be in Mina before Maghrib, right?
Before midnight.
Before midnight.
Before
So
midnight.
if you want to do a tawaf, then you do the tawaf. When would a good idea to do a nighttime tawaf?
I mean, if it is better, my advice to you, I mean, you could do it any of the tawaf. You're talking about tawaf al-ifada or tawaf al-hajj, it's called, which is a requirement. This is a rukun. Okay, so my recommendation, as I said, is to do it before dhuhr prayer, 11 a.m. Yarhamkumullah, before 11 a.m. because the longer you wait, the more crowded it would be. So if something were an obstacle that you couldn't do it, you could still do tawaf al-ifada not only on the 10th, you could do it on the 11th or the 12th, so you could do it later. But the irony is that you could not get out of your ihram,
Okay.
according to certain scholars. Other scholars says that. So the scholars that I adopt, basically you could not get off your ihram unless you do what? You finish tawaf and sa'i al-ifada.
And then you have to come back before midnight in Mina, right?
Yes.
So after midnight, there's no possibility that you go back till Fajr, right?
Where are you going?
If you do the tawaf.
I mean, again, your objective is to finish tawaf, tawaf and sa'i al-ifada. So try your best to be at Min and midnight. So again, the priority is to finish your tawaf and sa'i al-ifada, not the midnight and Mina. So if something happened out of your control and you are still trying to finish tawaf al-ifada, even at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., finish it. Finish it whenever you could and try to be in Mina before midnight. If you couldn't, something obstructed you, something delayed you, finish your duties of the 10th as much as possible. Inshallah ta'ala. Inshallah ta'ala it will be easy. Yani, inshallah ta'ala. Yes,
So
akhi.
you mentioned that you can do sa'i on the 11th and the 12th. Is that permissible?
Tawaf and sa'i, yeah. I mean, if you couldn't do it on the 10th, you were sick. We had some people just fell sick. And then on the 10th of the Hijjah, they basically fell sick. So by the time they hit Mina, they were in the Mina tent, they could not even move. So we had to give them antibiotics, ibuprofens, anti-inflammation, whatever it may be, even some shots to revive them. So they couldn't do anything. They stayed in their ihram for 1-2 days till the 12th, and then they did tawaf and sa'i al-ifada. So there are many different possibilities. If you get so much into them, we will never get out of it today.
So if you did only the 3 required,
Yes.
and then you postpone the sa'i out.
It's just, what can you do? Yeah, what can you do? I mean, try your best. I'm talking about ideal things. Okay, so some thoughts before you go. Inna Allah tayyib la yaqbalu illa tayyib. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is good and He accepts only that is good. So make sure whatever you do that is truly good. And we've given an example about the 2 sons of what? Of Adam. Allah accepted from one, did not accept from the other. Why? It's what? Not only it has to, your deed not only has to be pure for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and as Allah and His Messenger required you, but your heart has to be what? Has to be in there, has to be attached to it. So whatever you do, make sure that you're fully aware of it. Otherwise, Allah does not accept it. And we've mentioned also the hadith of the nomad, the Bedouin who came to the masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He prayed in a haste. And he came to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, "You did not pray. Go and pray again." And he kept on doing it for 3 times. They're going up and down, like he's throwing it away. Don't throw it away. So make sure that whatever you do, you really giving it sincere, deep thought. When you say Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, you are praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Lord of everything. So think of every word that you're saying. When you say tasbih, make sure that in ruku' and sujood, make sure that your body and soul is really engaged of what you are saying and doing. Whether it is prayer, whether it is tawaf, whether it is sa'i, make sure that it is there. Because only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts only that is good, and that's what counted for you. Otherwise you'll be praying for 10, 20 years, and if you're going that doesn't count nothing. You've been praying for 10 years, but it's nothing. And the day of Yawm al-Qiyamah comes, you got no salah. Why? I've been praying for 20 years, but your heart is not in it. Going up and down like a spring. I've prayed. Yeah, you've done the motions, but it counts 0. Or maybe it counts 10%, or it counts 5%, because you are only aware of only Alhamdulillah, the left of it is, you went through it. I mean, don't do that. You are basically communicating, and you are what? You are basically, you want your heart to be attached to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Have that attachment. Without it, you're not doing anything. You're wasting your time. You go as well and buy you a sandwich or something. It's probably better if you say Bismillah and eat it. Anyhow, so verily Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept only that is good. Have true intention for Hajj, that may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept it from you. You're not there for boast or reputation. To prepare yourself for good conduct. And as we said, Allah subhanahu wa